How would you answer this question? What is learning? According to a definition in my field, almost everything we normally do in our schools and classrooms is a complete waste of time. You'll see what I mean in a minute. One summer afternoon when I was a kid, I was playing hide and seek with my brother out in the forest. I found a perfect spot behind a large tree, and I lay down to get as hidden as possible. Suddenly, excruciating pain overwhelmed me. I had laid down in a fire ant hill, and thousands of fire ants were biting me. This traumatic experience was a painful lesson in the laws of cause and effect. You lie down in a fire ant hill, you will feel the fire. Cause and effect. For over 2 decades, I've been teaching, and much of this work has been teaching teachers how to teach. For instance, I've often conducted faculty development workshops. So we'd select a few evidence-based, high-impact practices, and we'd help professors understand how to integrate those practices into their own teaching. We'd work with them for weeks, sometimes months, and when we were finished, they would immediately go back to doing things the way they had always done them. This was my life's work. Each of these epic fails was deeply personal and painful. Why was I not able to help educators implement practices that a robust body of literature has shown to be powerful? Where was I going wrong? Cause? I couldn't find one. When I lay down in that fire ant hill, I experienced cause and effect. The next year, I broke my arm falling off the porch railing at a little country church my dad had built. Cause and effect. Since the moment we are born, our lives are full of experiences of cause and effect. This is how we learn. This is how we grow up, how we survive. But it's also why it becomes so difficult to understand situations when effects cannot be attributed directly to any specific cause. But wait, isn't everything in our universe governed by laws of cause and effect? There isn't any such thing as an effect without a cause, right? Actually, there are some things. Some things that happen where it's not possible to identify any cause, because the laws of cause and effect don't apply in those situations because other laws take over. I will argue that our practices are just this sort of thing. And the only way to change our practices is to first change our thinking. One summer afternoon when I was a kid, I came across an anthill that was very large, several feet across. It was large enough that by kicking it, I made a hole in the side of that anthill. And then something amazing happened. A few weeks later, I saw that same anthill again, and the hole I had kicked was mostly gone. Anthills are amazing things. They have ventilation systems. They have waste disposal systems, nursery systems, even farming systems sometimes. And yet, none of those individual ants have any understanding of ventilation, of waste disposal, of farming. A scientist could spend an entire lifetime studying those individual ants and never understand how this happens. This is what we call emergence. Emergence is a feature of all complex systems. In a complex system, such as an anthill, a large number of interdependent elements, ants for instance, interact. And those interactions lead to things happening that can't be explained through cause and effect thinking. We call these things emergent phenomena. It is impossible to explain emergent phenomena by trying to identify causes. If you ever see something happen that's like much greater than the sum of its parts, you might be looking at emergence. Now, many complex systems tend toward equilibrium. That is, if the system is disrupted in some way, if you kick the anthill, the system tries to adjust in order to get things back to how they were before. And that's all you really need to know about complex systems. There's many interdependent elements. There's this emergence and equilibrium. Now, these complex systems are all around us, as are emergent phenomena. Traffic, emergence. Economic inequality, emergence. Climate change, emergence. Broken healthcare system, emergence. It is impossible to tackle these sorts of issues through the cause and effect thinking we have each developed through millions of formative experiences throughout our lives. Why? Because this way of thinking seeks to do the impossible, to change emergent phenomena without changing the underlying complex system. It's like kicking an anthill. When I was a little boy, I didn't go to school. In fact, I never entered a classroom until I was 15 years old and went to college. Prior to that, I was homeschooled, or unschooled to be more accurate. No curriculum, no textbooks, no lectures, of course, no exams, just learning. So when I went to college, I was quite surprised at how this learning was supposed to happen. I did fine. I earned a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD. But I'm still surprised when I see classrooms dominated by lectures, textbooks, and exams, and very little learning, frankly. So I became a learning scientist. Learning scientists study what is learning and how can we make powerful learning happen. Over the last 7 years, I've been doing a number of research studies, always with the same question. What is learning? I interviewed and surveyed 500 people in the general public. I analyzed 600 articles from academic journals, word by word. I interviewed professors. I interviewed the founders of the field of learning sciences and the most famous learning scientists. The first thing I found was that the overwhelming majority of people define learning as acquisition of knowledge and skills. You take pieces of knowledge and you stick it into your brain area and you make sure it sticks. You might need a hammer. And to make sure it's stuck, you take an exam. The second thing I found was that learning scientists define learning as becoming, a process of becoming, a change in who you are as a human being. And this becoming is intertwined with construction, individual, collaborative, and collective construction of meaning, construction of self, construction of your world. But the most powerful finding was, and this changed everything for me, totally transformed my way of thinking. The most powerful finding was that conceptualizations are complex systems, complex conceptual systems. And our practices are emergent from those systems. Simple, but very powerful. Conceptualizations lead to practices. If you try to change your practices or the practices of others without first changing conceptualizations, you will fail. You'll be kicking an anthill. So I developed some innovative research methods to identify these different complex conceptual systems using network analysis tools, to identify these different systems and their emergent practices. I found that in the dominant conceptualization of learning, acquisition or sticking stuff in your head, there are thousands of interdependent ideas. Many of these ideas equate the human mind with a computer. Input, storage, processing, retrieval. And many of these ideas define knowledge as little objects that can be transferred, acquired, organized, integrated. And these knowledge objects are discovered by other people, approved as truth by people in positions of authority, and then transferred to you. Now, all of these ideas in this complex conceptual system, they interact to produce the emergent phenomena of practices in teaching and learning. So if learning is transfer of knowledge from an authoritative source, a teacher or a textbook, for instance, into the minds of learners, the emergent practices include delivering good lectures, using the best textbooks, and carefully crafting exams. Now, most people assume that these can be good practices, but 3 decades of research by learning scientists has shown that these practices are generally a complete waste of time, and sometimes even quite damaging. But emergence and equilibrium, if you kick this anthill, it'll always go back to the same: lectures, textbooks, and exams. Now, the conceptualization of learning in the learning sciences is a completely different complex conceptual system, consisting of thousands of completely different ideas. These ideas are more organic, more alive. Ideas such as becoming, transformation, relationships, actions, interactions. And many of these ideas are really empowering. Ideas such as construction, ownership, real-world impact. And knowledge isn't static. Collections of unchanging and distinct objects. No, knowledge is alive, always moving, always changing. Knowledge isn't in a book, or in a lecture, or even in your head. Knowledge is located in human activity, located in human actions and interactions. Knowledge is a verb. Now, all of these ideas in this complex conceptual system, they interact and they produce a completely different set of emergent phenomena, a completely different set of practices. If learning is becoming and the construction of knowledge, the most powerful practices involve exploration. They're grounded in learner interests. They engage learners in creative, generative, collaborative projects with real-world relevance and impact. So, what about lectures? Sure. A few mini lectures might be good. Better yet, if the students are the ones doing the lecturing. And what about textbooks? Well, actually, that's quite wonderful, but only if the students are the ones writing the textbooks. And exams? Well, actually, student-created exams can be good sometimes if they don't determine your grade, because learning is much too complex to ever measure on any exam. Most importantly, learning is all about community, all about relationships and actions and interactions and becoming. How are you going to measure that on an exam? So some of you might be wondering, so what should I do to become a better learner, a better teacher? And this is the point. There is nothing you can do, because everything you do is emergent. We have to change our thinking before we can change what we do. For decades, I tried to help educators and students adopt high-impact practices. For decades, I failed. And for decades, others have failed. We have to stop kicking anthills. If we continue to try to change practices in teaching and learning directly by introducing better practices and training educators and students in using those practices, we'll continue to fail. We have to stop kicking anthills. Only by changing the underlying complex conceptual system, the conceptualizations from which practices emerge, only then can we hope to bring about more powerful and deep learning. So, how can we change conceptualizations? There's 3 parts. First, identify key ideas or leverage points in the complex conceptual system. Second, apply pressure to those ideas. And third, sustain that pressure until you reach a tipping point. We have to put pressure on key ideas in our common sense, but sometimes wrong, conceptualizations of learning. We have to get people, all people, not just educators and students, to start questioning our assumptions about the nature of learning. And we have to keep this pressure going until we reach a critical mass, a tipping point. And it's not just conceptualizations of learning. This applies to any complex conceptual system. Conceptualizations of family, of democracy, of the environment, of race, of equality, equity, and justice. We have to put sustained, long-term pressure on key ideas in any of our conceptualizations, if those conceptualizations are leading to problematic practices. Only then will the complex system reach a tipping point, undergo a phase transition, and become a new conceptualization. Only then will it be possible for better, more powerful, more beautiful practices to emerge. So the next time you experience an epic fail, the next time you encounter a seemingly intractable problem, ask yourself, is this a simple cause and effect situation, as many situations are? Or could it be a complex system? If it is, stop kicking ant hills. Thank you.